Okay, so limiting factors. This is a paper 2 specific topic. Last came up in 2019, so definitely one if you're looking at 2025, it could well be a question. So what we're looking at when we're saying limiting factors or scarce resources is that a company is restricted. So they've either got a shortage of labor or they've got a shortage of materials, so they cannot produce enough to meet demand. And so we've got multiple products and we have to find a method in order to maximize profit. So I put 5 steps on this particular slide just to show you how I would tackle this question. So the first thing you've got to look for is what is the limiting factor? So is it labor or is it materials? Now that should be in the question. Now it could be that you have to work it out. So they tell you the amount of hours per unit, they tell you the amount of kilograms per unit for each of the products, and you work out which one you're short of. That hasn't been how it's been asked before, but it could be. So just think that could be the working. So if you know the amount of hours per unit, you know the amount of kilograms per unit, you work out for each and then compare that to the maximum availability of both. Once you know the limiting factor, the next thing we're going to be needing to look for is the CPU, or the contribution per unit for each product. So let's just be very clear, the contribution per unit is the selling price less any variable costs to produce that item. So don't take away any fixed costs. And so what we're looking at is the contribution that each product makes towards those fixed costs. So we go selling price, take away variable costs, and then we got a contribution per unit for each of the individual products. However, that isn't how we're going to deal with the limiting factor. We're not going to go with the product that makes the most contribution per unit. We're going to go for the product that makes the most contribution per limiting factor. So the next step is calculate the contribution per limiting factor. My highlighting going really well here. So if the limiting factor is hours, we divide our contribution by the amount of hours per unit, or the amount of kilograms per unit if it's materials. Sometimes part of the question will be you working out the kilograms or hours per unit, and that will be a mark in itself. So we're going to work out the contribution per limiting factor, because that's how we maximize profit. Not contribution per unit, but contribution per limiting factor. Because one other product might use a lot of a particular scarce resource, and so therefore the contribution per scarce resource will be quite a lot lower. Once we've done that, and each of these steps is a mark in the question. So like I said, you can get a mark for calculating the limiting factor, but you'll get another mark for calculating the contribution per limiting factor, and you get another mark for ranking them in order. So number one, debate about this sometimes with students, but number one is the highest contribution per limiting factor. So the one that's making you the most profit. I mean, obviously we say contribution because it's not after fixed costs. So the most contribution will produce as many of those, and then the second will be the second most, and so on. So put them in order. Once you've put them in order, you're going to then manufacture the products in rank order. So like I said, you make as many of number one, as many of number two, and what you'll have left is a little bit of material, a little bit of hours, and we make as much of the last ranked product as possible. So obviously the best way to do this is to look at that question for 2019 and how you would tackle it. So let's just bring this question up. Okay, so this is the question. So from A2 2019 paper 2. And so what we've got, let's highlight the key things here. So Nodlam has got 3 products. The maximum demand for the 3 products are here. So 5,500, 6,200, and 7,400 units for the imaginatively named A, B, and C. Then we've got the selling price, direct materials, direct labor, variable overheads, and fixed overheads. Let's just look at all the data first, all the information. So we've got all of that. That can help us to make some calculations. We've then been told material costs £2 per kilogram. And let's have a look at this. This is the important bit. So the supplier has been having problems, and they've been unable to supply it. Due to this, only 176,840 kilos are available during the production period. So if we work that one out, we cannot actually produce the 3 levels of demand required. So they want you to calculate the maximum profit that can be made, allowing for the optimum use of the scarce material resource. So the optimum use is going to use those 5 steps that we discussed at the beginning of the video. And now we just got to go through that. So we will work out the contribution. So the contribution is going to be selling price, take away all of the variable costs. We're going to ignore that fixed overheads line. That's not relevant. That will be relevant when we're working at the maximum profit. That gives us a contribution per unit. We've then got to work out the contribution per kilo. Now, we need to use this information here, the fact that material is £2 per kilo, to help us with that. So we can then look at it. We spend £24 of material for A, so we divide that by 2, it needs 12 kilos. and then we go from there. So I'm not going to do the calculations here. I'm going to go through the mark scheme in a moment, but we're going to go contribution divided by kilos, rank them in order, and then produce them in order. And once we've done that, we can then move on to work out the profit. So on the next slide, let's just look at that. We've got the breakdown of all the figures in a format. So you don't have to have it in a table format. Management accounts, there is no set layout, but you do need to make sure these individual pieces of information are available because each of them can get you a mark. So like we can see, if we calculate the contribution correctly for each unit, you're going to get 1 mark. And so just making sure that we would include variable overheads because they are a variable cost. And that's what contribution is looking at, the difference between your selling price and your variable costs. Then, like we said, dividing the material cost per unit by the £2 will give you the materials used by each unit. So that will give you another mark. Contribution per kilo, so then literally you're just going to divide the contribution per unit by the materials used. That will give you a contribution per kilo. That's another mark. That is own figure. So if one of the materials or the contribution was wrong, you could still gain a mark because you're showing you have to calculate contribution per kilo. We're then going to rank them in order. So you're going to make sure that you're going to put B as number 1 because that's the highest contribution per kilo, A is second, and so on. Own figure, but again, if you're ranking them with an incorrect figure, you're still showing you understand that's what you've got to do. So you're going to get 1 mark. So we've got 4 marks at this stage. Then we're going to do a production plan. So like we said, we've ranked B as number 1. So we're going to rank, because of that ranking, we're going to produce as many of B as possible. At the beginning of the question, we said that B has a maximum demand of 6,200 units. So we're going to make 6,200. We're going to make more than that. Sales are the limiting factor. We're going to make as much as we can sell. And as that uses 10 kilos per unit, that's going to use 62,000 kilos. So we need to say how many kilos we're going to use. Then with A, which is second ranked, we're going to make the 5,500, again times it by the 12 kilos, and we're going to have 66,000. Now, if you've got the wrong amount of kilos, and the examiner's got a bit of work to do because your production plan could be linked to that figure. So you can still get the marks if you've got one of the stages wrong. Then what you'll have is what's left. So you've got 66,000 and 62,000. So you've used up 128,000 kilos. You have got, therefore, because you've got a total of 176,840, you have got 48,840 kilograms left. So what you've got to do slightly differently now is work backwards to work out how many units you can make of the last remaining or last ranked product. So if you've got 48,840 kilos, you're going to divide it by the 11 kilos per unit, and that gives you the 4,440 units that you can make of C. So we've got our optimum production plan. We've got 7 marks. We've got to work out the maximum profit. So on the next slide, we go from that production plan. So B, we've managed to produce all 6,200. We make a contribution of 72. That will be own figure based on all of our other figures, but hopefully we've got them right. That means you would have a contribution for B of this, because we got 6,272. That's how much it's making. A, do the same principle, 5,500 times the contribution. We've got that. And for C, we've got to just base it on the new figure, which is 4,440. So you're getting a mark, really quite a nice mark for multiplying the production plan by the contribution you've already worked out. You're going to get 3 marks in total for that, so it's quite generous. You can see there's 3 marks for fixed overheads. Now, to a degree, this is pretty straightforward. So you're selling 5,500 of A, you're going to multiply it by its fixed overhead per unit. You're selling 6,200 of B, and that's going to be multiplied by the amount. You get 155,000, 154,000. What you'll notice is C, you are still multiplying it by 7,400 units. So where does the 7,400 come from? Well, that's how many units you could sell of C. Now, fixed costs do not change with output. So the fact that we've had to reduce our production to 4,440 doesn't change anything. We would still have a £236,800 fixed cost, irrespective of what happens. And so therefore, we will include that. We can't go 4,440 times 32. That's the incorrect figure. So just keep that in mind. Fixed costs do not change in output. So that's why you get 3 marks for the 545,800. Then we take that away from the contribution. You get an own figure profit for the year. So they've given you some other bits. So if they saw the 4,440 for C, you can just get the 7 marks anyway. If we do it by profit per unit instead, then you can only get 6. The calculation of maximum profit, the marks the profit per unit must be based on contribution, not contribution per kilo. So obviously just keeping that in mind. But step by step, this is achievable, but you've got to go from the beginning, work out the limiting factor, contribution, very clearly laid out workings, and you can get 14 out of 14 on this. The associated 6 marker was talking about whether they should get an alternative supplier. Good question. So you can then look at quality, you can look at cost, reliability, and then the impact that could potentially have on contribution. But that's not a bad question. Okay, good luck.